you can maybe join me. And as we welcome you, I know the role of the trustees has evolved over the years. There's definitely more responsibility, there's more accountability. But I think part of that is the way we work with trustees hasn't evolved with it. So that's often where the friction begins. And it's often not the problem, but it's the effort involved in it. So I think today is about how do we structure this to take it to a new level or next level going forward. So Maritza, take us to that. And once again, well done. Thank you for being here today, and let's go.
Thank you, Skulk. Good morning, everyone. Like everyone has said, absolute privilege. So nice to be with you and spend some time with you. While we're really excited to launch this app, we believe it's going to make an impact. We'll be discussing today, just in this session, redefining value towards community asset management. So it links a little bit to what we said at Engage. And I want to take you back to just taking 3 steps back and say community living is where people live together in close proximity to each other. So they share spaces, they share decisions, and they share responsibilities. And there's many role players in a community management industry. So we've got trustees, we've got owners, we've got lots of stakeholders, and each of these have very distinct responsibilities, roles, but also very distinct needs. Trustees and owners primarily concerned with ensuring that the community is safe and that it's well managed, because that's the place they live and they want to have a good experience, but they also want their assets to increase. And that's why they want it to be well maintained, so that it is nice to live there, the swimming pool's clean, but also for the asset to actually increase in value. The managing agent plays a pivotal role in bringing all of this together. So to help with all these interactions between trustees, owners, and stakeholders, seamless communication is the dream there, because that is where the managing agent plays a very big role. So facilitating access to information and addressing concerns promptly, that is how the managing agent helps to just foster a harmonious and thriving community. And we're saying all of this to really understand the role players, because we are, for the first time, trying to put technology and get adoption in one of those role players' hands. So just to maybe contextualize why we're preaching to the converted of how a community work. We're really trying to understand the role players here. So if we now look at the first one, which is the trustees, I think it's important for us to say here that this role has evolved. It's evolved from a part-time volunteer role, which worked before the regulation changes in 2018. But today, it is still a part-time volunteer role, but it has high pressure of a professional level person. The demands is similar to that of a person on a board of a director of a company. The needs of the trustee, however, is that for that reason, they just want the role to take less time. They don't have time. They're volunteering their time and they've got another job to do. So they want a professional and capable managing agent or community manager, and they want accurate and understandable reporting, and they want convenience. That's what they want. So for us to remember that the person in the role of a trustee is a volunteer, that's not their main job, and we need them to collaborate with us. They want convenience. So just to hear what is the need of the trustee here. If we pivot to owners, the owner is very different. You know, they really just want their investment to their home to be maintained and for it to appreciate in value. And then they just want to enjoy living in the community. They want a harmonious environment. They want it to be they don't want their neighbors to bother them because it's their home. They want it to be well managed. And then they want responsive when they need answers or information or communication. They want it fast. So they want to be informed. They want to have that access to that information, but not so proactively. They want it when they want it. And that is a big difference between, let's say, trustees and owners. If we now look at these needs from owners and trustees, and we we pivot over to how does this play out towards the top 4 effort drivers for a managing agent. We can see that communication, trustee and owner, including requests and follow-ups, forms 44% of the top 4 effort drivers. Thereafter, we can take note there's some recurring tasks, which is just the normal things we need to do, uploading of cash books and those kind of things. Then meetings taking time, 16%, and then regulatory and compliance load, 12%. But the biggest effort driver is still communication, which makes sense if we look at the model we've just unpacked in the way we did. The positioning of the managing agent is at its core to collaborate between stakeholders to give every role player what they need in this environment. So if we go one level deeper and we say, okay, but where is it coming from? We can see that 66% of emails come from owners and trustees, and the majority from trustees. And this includes us having to follow up with trustees and trustees having to follow up with us. That's probably why it's quite a big portion of the email sources. But this makes sense if we think about the trustee model. It is a model where trustees need to make decisions. Now, we remember that they are volunteers and they're busy with other things. So I always say that, they're a hairdresser, or they're a teacher, or they're a CA, or they're a stay-at-home mom. So they're busy with other things, and we need their decision-making to execute as a managing agent. So that fuels correspondence because you need to get instruction all the time, and they need information from you. So that's a kind of a dynamic that will just fuel communication. And what we are seeing is this model is shaping how we, as managing agents or community managers, define our value today. So if we look at how we define our value and what does that mean, it's why are we valued? Why do we matter? What services do we give? Why do they pay us? A large percentage of our value definition is based on the administrative and repetitive tasks that we do for them. Because that is what most of the time is being spent on. So that's what our value is. We do all the administrative tasks, we answer the emails, we answer the questions when there is any questions, and very little is spent on, let's call it professional advisory and connection and relationship. That is a small portion of the value definition at present. But there's a saying that says every major industry transformation happened when a constraint was removed. And at Engage, we looked at these events, the Industrial Revolution, for example, and many others. The calculator that was an invention at some point. A constraint is removed, and that opens up an opportunity for transformation in an industry. So if we look at our current value definition, we know that AI is exceptionally good at administrative and repetitive tasks. So if we look 5 years into the future, like you asked Johnny to do, that is a reality, that there will be admin anchors that will be removed. It's possible, which means that will give space for value redefinition, meaning we can now decide what will we do if we don't spend 80% of our time on admin? What is that space, a blank canvas that we can redefine what our value is that we give to our clients. And when you redefine value, it is a different industry. It's a new industry. It feels different because what we provide is completely different to what it is today. And we introduced the concept at Engage of a new industry. And we introduced community asset management. From managing agent to a community asset manager. And the third phase here is where this new definition of value becomes a reality. It's real. You feel it. That's who you are. That's how you get treated. Your positioning is exactly that. You're trusted as a professional. And a lot of the reactive struggles that we have today, where we kind of have to hustle for value, we kind of have to hustle for respect, and for people to listen to us and to believe that the community manager knows what they're talking about. They always want to still go to an attorney, even though they'll get the same answer. That's gone. It's a new industry, but that needs to be shaped, and the value needs to be redefined in that process. How do we get there is the question. Well, we need to start by removing the anchors that's keeping us in administration, the things that's keeping us doing majority of our time, spending that on the administrative tasks. We have to remove that to create capacity. And we do that through workflows on an integrated solution where all the role players are part of that whole process. And we'll unpack that in more detail as we go. Very big consideration here is why we're saying all role players on the same solution. For AI to remove an admin anchor, the data needs to be centralized and structured, which means from start to finish, it needs to be on the same place. Then only can you automate that process, and then only can you start leveraging the data. So that's a very big consideration in this move towards redefining value towards community asset management. And then to get out of the foundational phase, we have to create or reach a consistent level of quality. And that is many of our efforts today is saying sorry and trying to explain why something went wrong. Why did the levy statements go out late? Why were there mistakes on the levy statement? Why did the payment take longer than it should have taken? It's our processes failing us, and then having to explain and for your team, if you're a community manager and in the front line, or finance saying the process, there's too much, there's not enough efficiency, so there's not enough time to get to a level where you can guarantee that a payment will be made within 24 hours or 48 hours or whatever that promise is you give to our client. So a consistent level of quality is predictable. You can say that, and that we have to reach that in order to create capacity to allow us to go into the phase between, let's say, foundational phase, and then the phase where it's a reality, which is the differentiating phase. Now there's a little bit more capacity, and you can start differentiating and using that time for different value items, and you can decide what those items are. So we'll go a little bit deeper into that. That is just the blueprint of, if we're en route to a new industry and there's all these shifts happening, admin anchors being removed towards community asset management, we start with removing admin anchors. And today, we'll talk about the communication and collaboration admin anchor, which we've seen is one of the biggest parts of effort for the community manager. So if we look at it, it's the stakeholders of the community, owners, trustees, stakeholders. And unfortunately, Donnie mentioned it as well, it is very fragmented, these requests. From voice notes to WhatsApps to emails to phone calls to landline calls to, I haven't heard Messenger, Facebook Messenger and Instagram Messenger. I mean, I'm very thankful and grateful for that. We haven't gone there yet, but it's very fragmented. And the challenge there is it's difficult to manage and it's taking a lot of time. So that's the admin anchor that we're trying to now unpack and say, how can we use the app eventually, but that workflow and collaboration of the anchor, the communication challenge, how can we solve that? So if we look one level deeper and we just see from trustees, because we're focusing on trustees today, what are the kind of things that a community manager must email the trustees for? So they need payment approvals. They need application approvals, like a pet application needs to be approved, or someone wants to extend the section. No, they need another resolution, but maybe just approval on aesthetics. So you need approvals. Then maintenance feedback. There's a lot of collaboration happening there. Get quotations, that kind of thing. Meeting requests, when can we have the date? And requesting trustee signatures on official documents. So that's all the things the community manager would initiate the emails towards the trustees. And then I made it a very long block because follow-ups. The biggest thing we hear when we interact with clients is they are just non-responsive. They just don't get back to me. So I ask, I initiate, and then it's radio silence, and then another email and another email and another one, because you need to prove that you can't act without the instruction. So you keep asking for that instruction, which sits in their email or wherever, and they are busy with another job. So that is one of the challenges. But the trustees also sometimes initiate emails towards the managing agent. They might have questions on the financial report. They might have quotation requests. We need to fix the gate. Can you get 3 quotations? They will ask for progress updates on things that we are busy with because they need to know how far is it, when are we going to be done? And then there's information requests. I want an age analysis, or can I have a copy of the rules or finance reports or just any information? And lastly, they would request for something to get paid. So they will send you an invoice and say, can we please proceed with payment? So all of these things are the reasons that trustees email us and the managing agent email the trustee. And for all of that, we need workflows. Now, workflow what is that? It is just a process of, based on the category, based on why you are contacting me, what is the steps that we need to take to get to the end of the process? So if we take a payment, a pet application, it starts when someone says, can I have a dog? And then it goes through, okay, let's get all the information. Where is the sterilization certificate? I need a photo of your dog. It goes to the trustees for approval. And then eventually the process ends with the communication back to the person that requested it. That is a workflow, knowing exactly from start to end. That is, so for everything that they email us about, we need to have a defined workflow, because a workflow can be automated. That is the brilliance of a workflow. And we discussed the rock solidness of a workflow. So in the Level Up session of last month, we spent a lot of times on, but how do I know if the workflow is good? Because a workflow must give you certain things. And I want to loop in Aliza in here. Welcome, Aliza.
Morning, everyone. Thank you, Marissa.
So, Aliza, just as a recap, let's use the payment workflow, for example, and take us through just what do we want to achieve with a payment workflow? If you it's a payment workflow in basic terms is there's a request for payment. Now it needs to go through certain approvals and it needs to get paid. But what are the characteristics that we can take into account? What must it do for it to be rock solid and be that thing that we need?
Melissa, I think when I think about a rock solid workflow, and we mentioned in the Level Up workshop as well, the first word that I always think of is it needs to be predictable. And by predictability, it means everyone at any point in time needs to know what is the next step and who is responsible for that step. So if you think about the payment workflow, if someone asks, when is this payment going to pay, or what is the progress on the specific payment, you need to be able to use a rock solid workflow, key on rock solid here, to give you that answer. You need to know, okay, this is the payment, it's here in the process, here in the workflow, and I already know what is the next step. I already know the associated timelines, and I know who is responsible for it. So if there's the responsibility is about being able to ask someone, should there be any things that are not clear, you can ask them. However, a rock solid workflow should eliminate all of those uncertainty or things that aren't clear. So I think that is the key thing about a rock solid workflow, is be able to say, I'm immediately advise and say, give a timeline or a promise, if you want to call it that, and say, this payment will be processed in the next in 2 days, and it will be paid to the supplier. You'll be able to see that status update on the specific supplier. So being able to say that with confidence and being able to trust your workflow immediately elevates you to show become like a professional and trusted. It provides a foundation to give that advice or feedback. So I think that is a rock solid workflow kind of just ensures that whatever you say, you can back yourself on it. So that's the confidence boost that you need from a rock solid workflow.
That it places you in a position of strength, and it also shortens the getting the answer back to the person. It almost champions the community manager or whoever gets the question from, say, a trustee. When will this be paid? Being able to check, okay, where is it in the workflow? It's only approved by this person. I exactly know what will happen when next. So it needs to be so clear and defined. At what time every day is payments exported? At what time do we send trustee approvals? At what time do we do this? With all those guardrails as part of the workflow, it makes sense that now the person is enabled to be backed by that foundation, and you can answer the question. And hopefully that consistency of quality is the real goal here. A workflow is only as good if it keeps your quality delivery consistent, because then it also eliminates having to always reactively explain why it went wrong. It shouldn't go wrong. If something goes wrong in a workflow, it means we missed a step. There wasn't enough fail safes in place. So if there's a key man dependency or there wasn't segregation of duties, and you kind of need to always, when a workflow fails, you need to go back to the drawing board and say, okay, wait, how will I make sure that this never happens again?
And I think the longevity of a workflow also, we sometimes forget about that, because at the beginning, when you implement the workflow and the questions are being asked, you'll be able to give that answer. And the answer will often always be in the same framework, because you have your workflow to guide your answer. And then at a point in time, the people who ask the questions will actually start answering themselves, because they know how you operate. They can trust how you operate. And I think that is often forgotten about. The long-term benefits of a good rock solid workflow is actually, like, just look a bit up. It's way more beneficial than just the short term. I'll be able to give them an accurate answer quickly. At the end, they'll be able to give them those answers themselves, because they know your quality, they know your practice, and they know your standard.
100%. It's that predictability will first be internal, and then it will, if your answer is not only the answer, but so they ask, when will this be paid? But you almost include the step of the workflow. Payments are always exported at 10, so tomorrow morning at 10. And you're kind of reiterating that. That's how you take the predictability to them as well. And predictability brings safety and trust. That is essentially what it does, as long as it's consistent. We also have key success factors where we mentioned all the role players need to be on the same solution, and there shouldn't be data fragmentation. Talk to us a little bit about why this is important from a workflow perspective. If you think about, we mentioned, you need to be able to remove an admin anchor by adding automation and intelligence to workflows. That is kind of critical.
Well, automation and intelligence, I think, is often about pattern recognition, and a workflow is a pattern. It consists out of actions that happens at a certain point in time, and automation and intelligence uses that pattern to show predictions to help you with that, literally knowing what the next step should be. And if all of that steps in your workflow sits scattered on different or fragmented on different platforms or different places, then the automation intelligence is a bit more hard to implement, because it needs to know everything everywhere and then know where to execute the next thing. But if everything happens on a single place, that automation intelligence becomes a lot easier to implement. So I think that's the key thing. And your action should not only be on a single platform, it's about everyone in the workflow. So including all the stakeholders on a single place to facilitate and collaborate on the specific workflow at the same place.
Yeah, I think the minute someone is not part of the workflow, it's like, I see it almost like a chain, and then one little loop is somewhere else. The data is never always right. You can't put an AI agent in the middle of that data set and say, you will know exactly when something needs to happen because you've got all the context. You don't, because some of it is sitting somewhere on WhatsApp, emails, Excel, the server. So you can't activate technology and automation because the full context is not there. And to get the full context, it's important to get all the role players on as quick as possible. So at inception, where the process starts, that's where you should already kind of capture it and say, okay, how do we go through the whole process? But okay, so we are talking about a lot of big concepts here, and I think the people that is joining us and who didn't enjoy, didn't join Engage. I hope there's no one that didn't enjoy Engage. There might be, where are we now? So to summarize, we're saying that we have to remove admin anchors. To remove admin anchors, we need workflows. We're busy with the communication admin anchor, and we've said we need workflows for the things that people email us about. Also mentioned that they all must be on the same solution. That makes sense. We have to link this to products. So how is this going to work? Because the real challenge here is we're sitting on requests, WhatsApps, emails, and a lot of fragmented places. How are we going to get this all on one place? Because if we're saying that's the goal, then how do we link that to product?
Yeah, Melissa, I think the various channels is the issue here. I think all the channels we use have never been designed to accommodate this kind of workflow. If you just look at the payment workflow, it's like 700 steps. There's a lot of collaboration that needs to happen, a lot of transparency, a lot of updates that needs to happen. And something like emails and WhatsApp is never designed to accommodate a workflow like that. So it's all about the vehicle that where these workflows needs to happen. And if we say, okay, we need to build the requests we get from trustees and owners into a workflow, and that workflow needs to happen in a central and structured place, you need a great vehicle for that. And that's where we see tasks coming in. Tasks should be that vehicle that from inception, so from that trigger or the instruction that happens, you need to be able to use a task all the way until completion. Why is that important? Because then, one, like you said, all the context is there. From the beginning to end, all the context is there. Collaboration happens on the same place. So it's not an email thread here and then a new email because you couldn't find the old email, and then on a group update, but then in a personal message update on WhatsApp. So everything on a single place, which means that back and forth follow-up doesn't happen on fragmented places. All the collaboration is on a single place. So if we look at tasks, we know that, okay, great, this can be used for workflows. However, there's steps that need to happen. I like to say all workflows are created equal, but some are more equal than others. And for that, you need a little bit more customization. You need to be able to customize and ensure that whatever this vehicle has all the tools, it has the aircon, it has the Bluetooth, whatever you need for your workflow to run to use it. So when we look at tasks, what will happen? We'll bring in. Do you mind just?
Aliza, before you go on, I think this makes a lot of sense, because what I've seen, and still remember from my days in the seat, is actually using online forms to get queries in. This is an account query, or this is the insurance claim, or this is and then you kind of use a form. And the reason why is to make these requests manageable, trackable, that was kind of the goal. And we're seeing that still, there's this need where people saying, I just want it to be manageable. So at source, getting all the information, that's important from whoever's making the request. But then the customizability of that today is a challenge. So am I hearing you correctly? You're saying tasks will be, we want to bring a task to how we get the request. So not an email, but rather a task. Now, I know there's a challenge there, because if I was sitting here thinking, yo, man, you guys are smoking your socks because owner or a trustee is not going to log in to a portal and then log a task. It's definitely not going to work. So we'll unpack that. Maybe just take us on how this will, the flexibility of it, before we go to address that second point, which is, okay, but how will we get them to use it? Let's first see, everyone needs to be able to collaborate. And the goal here is, how do we make the requests more manageable and get them in the workflow quicker? So if we look at that, we see community roles. How does that fit in to tasks?
So community roles is all about, if we remember again when we said a rock solid workflow, we need to know who is responsible. And the community roles is exactly that. It tells you who is responsible for this task or for a step in this task, and you'd be able to know who can I ask a question or who needs to take the baton at this point in the specific workflow. So that is what community roles is. It's also, if we think about just a bit further about trustees and owners, that you can set up a default to say that in this workflow, when that request comes in, so it speaks to that manageability. If it's this type of request, automatically assign it to the specific community role, to the community manager, or if it's an account query, to the accounts department. So that's it's about detailing who is the owner of the specific action that needs to be taken.
Yeah. I think we should maybe just position community roles as well. What is community roles? Well, it's live, and you can already set that up today. It was deployed, I think, at least six months ago.
Yes.
About and the goal for community roles is that Excel sheet that you have where you say, this is my list of buildings. And who is the creditors control clerk for community A, for B? Who's the accountant? Who's the community manager? So who is the person in a role per community to not have the Excel eventually, but to have that on the community role, the communities page, where you can now easily see. And you can see that's also, now you can start using that to set up you can say, assign a task to the community manager must do this. So someone is giving you a request and you can say, well, this must be done by the community manager. You don't even have to know who the community manager is for that building, because the solution can know that if we have done the community role setup. So then you can set up a task where there's a recurring task or a workflow. Then you can do that by using the roles because the data is available in the solution. Okay, from a flexibility, talk to us about the other things that's coming this year for tasks.
Yes, so like we said, different type of requests, all of them can be categorized to an extent to something. So if we look at task categories, they need to be a level of customization, being able to specify exactly what kind of category it is. And that lays the foundation for what we think of when we think about custom task fields. So if you think about it, I have a task category applications, and then a subcategory for applications called PEP applications. Now, what that allows you to say is if someone does log a request or task and select applications, PEP applications, then automatically I can have a setup, or I will have a setup where I've said that should someone select that, please display the following fields. So that's where you mentioned earlier about those requests being complete. That's how we guide someone to ensure that the message, the request that you get has complete. So there's no follow-up. You have that big block. So hopefully with this, that big block starts shrinking and shrinking. You don't have to ask for information from the get-go. You have all the information because you could guide them. So for any type of category, being able to say, okay, I know that when someone adds a task for the specific category, I can say I need this information, this information. You can even say they need to upload this type of document as well, and the list goes on. What it also means is that all those free text that's usually in an email is now structured. So everything is labeled, which if you think about automation intelligence, a lot easier to implement because I know exactly who's what. Think about reporting. Also a lot better to say, okay, give me a report with this specific field that I've set up. So I can see, for example, all the type of pay types or insurance policy numbers or anything like that. So that's the thinking when it comes to task categories and custom tasks. It lays the foundation for those requests be more complete to become manageable because you have all the information immediately. And that is basically
the benefit is, I know that keeping a pet registry is a challenge. You know, you need to know what the approved pets in every unit. But if you at source get these applications, then it's almost happening automatically. That's really great. And then you'll have the customizability to set up any workflow in that sense? What kind of thing, what process is there? Is it architectural changes, or is it, Then
And I think the great thing about this is now that I do have the package application, now on that specific task, the collaboration can start. So if we think about looking this back to the workflow, it's saying, okay, I have now I've entered all of this. Now, for example, someone needs to approve it. And that approval can happen on the original submission of the exact fit application.
Yeah. Okay, Aliza, that seems great. I think our biggest hurdle has been, okay, how did we get them to use this? And how do we get, because if we think about it, trustees can log into a portal and they can approve a payment. They can even create tasks from a portal today. Owners can't create necessary tasks, but they can also help themselves to, for example, their statement, but they don't because they just don't. And that is a critical point in this whole process, is getting these people to, at source, where they request, to be using that. And that is where we want to make them part of the workflow, but making it convenient is where an app comes in. So we are seeing the trustee and later owner requests as two sources that we now need to say, okay, but how are we going to make it convenient? So maybe just some thoughts on the trustee and then the owner. How do we look at making them fill in the task instead of sending the email or even the WhatsApp?
So I think convenience today looks like, I think we've mentioned quite a few times, like in the palm of your hand, and logging into a portal on your laptop. It's not convenient unless you sit in front of your laptop all day. But that's not when the trustees work. They do it at night when they're in the kitchen waiting for the laundry, for the dishwasher to finish, or whatever it might be. So it's about being able to access it in the palm of your hand, and that's where the trustee app comes into play. So, well, let's see. Okay, we give a trustee app in the palm of their hand. They can do it on the go. They have all the context they need in that specific app to do those specific actions. And then owner requests, we're still thinking about, and I think there's where a lot of collaboration can happen. But does owner request also look in the app? Was it a link that they scan? Is the QR code? So we're thinking about that, looking at how to ensure that an owner who's not necessarily as involved in the management of the community day to day still have a convenient and accessible way of logging these requests that will, to an extent, be on par with WhatsApp or email, whatever it might be. So if you think about the trustee app now specifically, we could identify the two workflows, like we said earlier, the payments workflow and instructions workflow, which tasks should facilitate or can become the vehicle for that specifically.
So we're seeing the trustee app is really the first stab at getting requests at source in a vehicle we call tasks or payment approvals easy in the palm of their hand. I also think we're going to learn a lot from how the trustees respond to this, so that we solution the right solution for the owner side, which is a different role player. But for the trustee, we are seeing that's the goal here. And we are trying to make them part of the workflow and give them access. But in essence, for the managing agent, if we get it right, we will fast track decisions and feedback from trustees, which we mentioned at the very beginning is a real challenge. Getting them to action what we need them to action, give us that instruction so that we can move forward. And hopefully this is only the start of building workflows, getting the trustees part of the workflow, managing that change so that we can automate at some point these processes and then still do that value redefinition of a new, better industry where it just feels like you are respected, valued, and you're seen as a trusted professional. That is ultimately the goal. So looking forward to coming back a little bit later. But for now, that is the the app and how we are going to use it for our positioning, getting the trustees back into the workflow.